Part 2. Conclusions. 1. Conclusions in regard to neo-Stalinism. A. Interdependence of the Polish and Russian revolutions. Isaac Deutscher makes the following generalization. If the history of the Polish Communist Party and Poland in general proves anything, it proves how inviolable the connection between the Polish and Russian revolutions is. This has been proven in both a negative and a positive sense. It is no coincidence that the Polish military is helping Ukraine to fight against Russia. In 1936-38, Stalin shot or exiled to Siberia more than 100,000 Polish communists. In 1940, in Katyn, Stalin shot thousands of Polish officers who had surrendered to the Red Army after its invasion in 1939. In both cases, the most conscientious representatives of the Polish people died. This was worse than the killings of Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht at the hands of the German proto-fascists in 1919. Only those Stalinists who were in Polish prisons survived, such as Beirut and Gomulka. The lesson that follows from this is that Russia, with its attack on February 24, 2022, turned Ukraine from its closest ally into its sworn enemy for many decades, if not centuries, to come. In the future, we will see how Ukrainians will go to fight against Russia, just as the Poles do today. The main enemy in Russia is its own neo-Stalinist leadership, aimed at the restoration of both capitalism and the USSR. Nothing good can come from these contradictory intentions. B. Conclusions in relationship to communist parties. The dissolution of the Comintern in 1943 and the subsequent disorganization of the communist parties as ruling parties in the Warsaw Pact countries should be seen as a positive development, since these neo-Stalinist parties were mainly aimed at career advancement for the nomenklatura. They discredited and suppressed the communist movement. In a real communist party, the relations of members within the party must be communist, and not just the name and program. C. Political life in neo-Stalinist countries. The neo-Stalinist regime is characterized by one-leader parties, formal discussion of problems, and behind-the-scenes method of decision-making. The hidden or open struggle, turning into war between various national and territorial groupings of the nomenklatura, is the essence of the political life in neo-Stalinist countries. There is no democracy among the nomenklatura itself, but the imposition of a decision made at the very top, or in another country, if this country is a satellite. D. Change of leadership in neo-Stalinist countries. It should be noted that in all neo-Stalinist countries, the transfer of power from one leader to another takes place for the most part through a state coup. This was the case in Russia in 2000 when Putin came to power, and this was the case in Ukraine in 2014 as Poroshenko came to power, replacing Yanukovych. Perhaps they will also want to eliminate Zelensky, whose policy towards Russia became too belligerent for imperialism at the end of 2023. Against the backdrop of the war in Israel and tensions in relations between the United States and China. E. Using workers' movement and intellectuals' opposition for the purpose of restoration of capitalism. The neo-Stalinist regime actively uses the labor movement and socialist activists for its own purposes. Blackmail is often used to force activists to cooperate with the security service, after which these people are sent into the opposition camp to lead it. Such a tamed protest movement is actively used as a shield to protect the regime from the wrath of the people during the restoration of capitalism. F. Relationship to religion. The policy of reconciliation with enemies has never led to victory. This primarily concerns the church and religion in general. Church and religion are one of the tools of capitalism to restore its influence, especially in neo-Stalinist and poor capitalist countries. For example, see movie Salvador by Oliver Stone. G. Stalinism is not state capitalism. The ruling nomenclatura carries out decisions made at the very top. In exchange for this, it receives various material privileges, which, however, can be taken away at any time. These privileges are not the same as profit, which is received, for example, by shareholders in a capitalist joint stock company. Therefore, calling the Stalinist regime state capitalism means deliberately obscuring the essence of the matter. This is an attempt to bring the Stalinist regime under the standards of imperialism, to equate capitalism with Stalinism. In Poland, as in Russia, Ukraine, and other neo-Stalinist countries, nomenclatura privatization was carried out, the benefits of which were received by some former members of the Communist Party, their families and relatives. This privatization is explained precisely by the desire of the nomenclatura to turn into the capitalist class, to legally receive their super incomes, which previously they were forced to either steal or squeeze out in some other illegal way. H. Restoration of capitalism is a direct consequence of neo-Stalinism. The main trend is that the restoration of capitalism stems from the Stalinist regime. Nowhere else did another regime become a prerequisite for the restoration of capitalism. The neo-Stalinist regime is the main prerequisite for the restoration of capitalism. I. A coup d'etat and military dictatorship is the path towards the restoration of capitalism. The military dictatorship of the Stalinists paved the way for the open restoration of capitalism. Jaruzelski's coup on December 13, 1983, paved the way for Balcerovich's program. Yeltsin's coup in December of 1991 has led to Gaidar's program in 1992. Then there was the repetition of the scenario in Russia in October of 1993. J. The regime of restoration of capitalism. During the restoration of capitalism, we see a decline in industrial production in all countries. For example, we observed this trend in the former GDR, in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, etc. Since these countries do not live by the exploitation of other people, like the United States, for example, but through their own industry and agriculture, the decline of these industries means a general decline in the material standard of living in these countries. K. War as a wake-up call to the people. It took a war for the working class to become conscious. Slow methods of awakening, such as increasing prices, closing enterprises, cutting social guarantees and benefits, have had little effect in the neo-Stalinist regime. The war is, first of all, a consequence of the struggle of various national groups of the bureaucracy for power and property. The imperialist countries are also drawn into these wars, since their policy is to destroy the germs of socialism. For example, during the civil war in the former Yugoslavia, the imperialists sided with the former Ustasha and Muslims against the Serbs. In wars on the territory of the former USSR, they fight primarily against Russia. Today, the people of Ukraine and Russia are beginning to wake up and understand that there are the privileged ones who are not mobilized, and there are the common people who serve as the cannon fodder. In Ukraine, the common people die for the sake of the interests of the Ukrainian oligarchs and the American capital. In Russia, they die for the sake of the interests of their own nationalist nomenclatura. To die in this way is the fate of animals in a slaughterhouse, but not a fate worthy of conscientious people. 2. Conclusions in regard to imperialism. A. Parallel between crisis of imperialism and neo-Stalinism. If there is a crisis in the social production relations of Stalinism, then even more so, there is a crisis of such relations in imperialism. This is manifested in the technical lag of the United States from China and Russia, for example, in the production of supersonic missiles, in the lag in the introduction of robots in production, in the decrepit sphere of education, etc. This means that the collapse of these states is inevitable, like the collapse of Stalinism. B. The health of the leader of a country. The state of health, physical and mental, of the leader of a state is an indicator of the state of health of the entire country. For example, the health and mind of Joe Biden today is an indicator of the health of the United States today. If Trump is to win the elections in 2024, then this will be no better. C. The imminent collapse of NATO. States such as Poland and other former members of the Warsaw Pact that joined NATO in the late 1990s and early 2000s are not capitalist states, as are the United States, England, and other old NATO members. These are neo-Stalinist states. Contradictions between the old and new NATO members have already appeared in the past. In the future, such contradictions will intensify and may lead to the collapse of this defensive alliance, perhaps even to a war within it. 3. Conclusions in regard to socialism. A. A crisis of Marxism. An open letter to the party by Kuron and Maciejewski is one of the most mature attempts to criticize real socialism from the standpoint of revolutionary Marxism. We are also trying to critically comprehend the experience of real socialism, that is, neo-Stalinism. However, our position cannot be called Marxist because we have abandoned the position that the working class is revolutionary in modern times. One proof of this is the experience of solidarity in Poland in the 1980s. The labor movement and their supporters among the intelligentsia were used as a battering ram for the restoration of capitalism. We also believe that knowledge is the most important productive force of our time, which moves us even further away from Marxism, since in the latter, the productive forces are mainly premises, machines, and labor, etc. That is, the means of the Industrial Revolution. To go further, it is necessary to recognize scientific knowledge as the main productive force, and not just science, but multidimensional knowledge from various spheres of human activity. B. A modern avant-garde. Kuron and Maciejewski believe that the main opposing classes in Stalinist society are the working class and the central political bureaucracy. We have already explained about bureaucracy why we do not consider it as a class. But the working class today is not revolutionary either. A candidate for avant-garde can be considered to be a modern Renaissance man, that is, a multilaterally developed person. The essence of politics is power. If knowledge is power, then those who have real knowledge, and not the tinsel that masks itself as knowledge behind the walls of schools, also have power. C. A union of workers and intellectuals. The modern revolution will take place through the union of several classes and strata oppressed by the current government. The experience of Poland shows that it is the intelligentsia who come forward first and begin to help the workers. Andrzej Wajda made a very significant contribution to the overthrow of the PZPR government as the director of films about workers. For example, Men of Marble. D. An organization. There cannot be an independent and legal labor or leftist movement. As soon as it begins to organize, security service officers arrive and give you a choice. Either you work for us, or prison, or accidental death. Therefore, a truly revolutionary movement must be illegal from the very beginning, led by professional revolutionaries. The secret of the success of the core is the system of mutual assistance, especially assistance to the families of activists who ended up in prison. CORE helped with money, food, and lawyers. At the same time, they started a newspaper that chronicled what was happening and thus organized the people. At first, the workers were not interested in this newspaper, and it was a success among part of the intelligentsia. E. A key task for any social economic formation. The key task for any economic social system is to ensure a higher quality of labor. Today, this is only possible through the transition to a creative attitude towards one's work. It is necessary to teach creativity in any field of activity, be it science, sports, or anything else. The opposite of a creative approach is memorizing facts, which kills children's curiosity and their creative energy. F. The goal of activity under socialism. The goal of workers in the new socialism should not be to consume as much as possible, as Kuron and Mazilevsky believe. See their open letter to the party, 1963. But to work as little as possible in a forced labor and to create as much as possible, that is, to manifest one's creative essence. G. Educate not specialists, but universal human beings. One of the most important tests in creating socialism is the management system. The management system is key when creating any system, for example, a technical one. If specialists are created, then we will necessarily get a bureaucracy that deals exclusively with management, and then again we will have all the problems of Stalinist society, such as special privileges for managers and ultimately the restoration of capitalism. To prevent this, it is necessary to create not specialists, but generalists. This means that every person must be involved in at least two areas, in management and in some productive area, such as programming, teaching, treatment, research, etc. If everyone is involved in management, then there will not be an exclusive layer engaged in management. That is, we will eliminate bureaucracy. To do this, it is necessary that all members of society learn management. For this purpose, two types of classes are needed. One, theoretical, two, practical. In theoretical classes, it is necessary to study the history of society that seeks to create socialism. On a practical level, existing managers must teach everyone management skills on the practical problems they encounter. This means that the worker must be torn away from his main function, for example, metal processing, and must be involved in management training. This is what will give us the opportunity to achieve real democracy. Managing society can be the same as teaching how to control a car or an airplane or a drone. No one gets behind the wheel and drives the car down the highway. They start with theory, then move on to practice under the guidance of an experienced instructor. Thank you very much for listening. This is the end of the story about restoration of capitalism in Poland. Please send your remarks, your letters to internationalleft@protonmail.com. Bye.